Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This episode we're covering vampires in D&D and how you can better bring them into your games. I'll be going over their lore, mechanics, and tips to give you insights into how to make them really feel more genuine, real, and impactful in your games. So let's get started. Vampires are creatures of undeath that cling to this feeling and obsession of mortality. They look at people, the living, and see parts of themselves that they'll never get back or that they never got while they were alive. For example, if they wanted something like love, they'll be obsessed with taking and spawning vampires from beautiful people. If they're obsessed with youth, they might turn children or young people into vampires. If they want success, they might ruin, curse, or destroy those that they felt like posed a roadblock to their success in life. And I've been mentioning, siring and creating these vampire spawn. And, vampires themselves are powerful, and they're probably one of the most threatening and powerful forms of undead that we have in the game. But one of the things that's truly terrifying about a vampire is the number of servants that they can put under their control in a very short period of time. And now, of course, how this works is, by biting their victims. However, the mechanics to this are a little more complicated. So you see, if a vampire bites a target and the damage of that bite brings a humanoid target down to 0 hit points, then they die. But there's more. If this slain target is then buried, they will rise the following night as a vampire spawn under the vampire's control. And this is quite an interesting bit of lore/mechanics into the vampires. And this is where we see something akin to a hierarchy of how vampirism works within the lore. We have 2 main types of vampires: true vampires and vampire spawn. A vampire spawn is under the true vampire's control and serve as foot soldiers, grunts, lackeys, but sometimes vampire spawn can become true vampires. There are 2 different ways that a vampire spawn may become its own true vampire and then once again get its own free will. The 2 ways involve either A, the true vampire that sired the vampire spawn dies, or B, the true vampire lets their spawn draw and drink blood from the true vampire's own body. And now A is something that happens frequently enough. People get mad, torches, pitchforks, yada yada, and they at least try to, or actually do manage to, kill the vampire that's terrorizing the town. But B is a little rarer. Typically, a vampire won't relinquish its control over its spawn, but it does happen from time to time. And now, something that's very interesting to me is how big of a problem taking down a true vampire really is. Think of it like this. For a majority of people, a vampire spawn is already really bad news. They have resistance to non-magical piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage. They have over 80 hit points, and they can even regenerate missing hit points at the start of their turn. However, the big silver lining to all of this is that vampire spawn can't make new vampires. Only true vampires can. So yes, it's not good that you have this undead servant that's going around biting people and putting people on the ground, but if a target is slain, they don't become a vampire if they're buried. So that's at least something a little good in dealing with that. So think about it like this. Throughout the course of a vampire's life and reign, they might sire dozens of vampire spawn. If you take out the true vampire that created those vampire spawn, then all of those spawn become true vampires. And now you've got a massive problem on your hands. A true vampire can shapeshift, regenerate, is even tankier and even harder for the party to put down than a regular vampire spawn. So what this essentially does is make a bunch of vampire spawn power up and become that much more difficult for you and the party to deal with. And the worst part of it is, you have no idea how many spawn a true vampire has created. For example, in the D&D vampire lore and mythos, Strahd was believed to be the first vampire, and man's been vamping for a while, if you catch my drift. The older the vampire is that you take down, the potentially worse the repercussions are for it. You could unknowingly release dozens, if not hundreds of vampires out into the world, all with their own free wills and agendas, aiming to wreak havoc on the world of the living. And your only potential hope is that the sunlight will take out some of the vampires before they have enough of a shot to accumulate enough power and get moving. And speaking of sunlight, while vampires come with their fair share of strengths, they also come with some pretty devastating weaknesses. So first of all, the pretty obvious one, vampires that are exposed to direct sunlight take 20 radiant damage a turn, and they also have disadvantage on skill checks and attack saving throws while they're exposed to direct sunlight. And this damage is pretty consistent too to one of their other weaknesses, running water. If a vampire ends its turn within running water, it will take 20 acid damage. The vampire can't enter in a home or dwelling that it doesn't have permission to enter from, and finally, if a stake is stabbed into its heart while the vampire sleeps, they are paralyzed until the stake is removed. And of course, there's garlic and the aversion to fire. But granted, in D&D, we don't have any mechanics that showcase the garlic allergy. And of course, you can kill a vampire with fire in D&D. You can kill a lot of things in D&D with fire. Although, weirdly enough though, in this case, water damage and radiant damage is actually much more efficient. So now that we've gone over vampires a bit more, how can we better bring them into your games? For starters, as I've mentioned, a vampire is powerful and extremely hard to put down. However, they should be even more difficult to deal with because of their following. A vampire can sire tons of vampire spawn, and these vampires will all follow the true vampire's commands. Vampires are such a threat because they're together. They all work together with one another, and in some ways, they keep each other from kicking the bucket and create more problems for the party to deal with. If you kill a vampire spawn, you still have to deal with the true vampire. And if you kill the true vampire, you then need to deal with all of the vampire spawns that could become true vampires after the original falls. And not only this too, but I also like the angle of letting the party discover the weaknesses as well as how the creation of new vampires works within the campaign. Having your players slowly learn that the vampires are being born after they're released from the graves is a big plot point for any vampire hunt. And yes, many people know what vampires are, and yes, vampires are very iconic monsters, even to a certain degree that they might be seen as cliché, but that doesn't mean that you need to make them so basic. Let there be an element of mystery to their attacks. Leave the party on edge, wondering what's causing these incidences as well as the bizarre magical effects plaguing the town. And another very interesting aspect to create for vampires within your games is being mindful of their lineage and how they came to be. The way I see it, each vampire has their own lineage, and as I mentioned before, Strahd is one of the oldest documented vampires in D&D lore, and could have sired a bunch of different vampires. But then all of those vampires can sire different vampires and wreak havoc on the world. Once again, creating this lineage. However, you can also have people become vampires through otherworldly means. In many different cases, there are also accounts of other people being stricken with vampirism through other ways rather than just getting bitten. Maybe they became a vampire after trying to ascend and empower themselves with magic. Or maybe they made a treaty with dark powers and forces to aid their will and ambitions. Sometimes otherworldly forces and creatures have the power to make a target a true vampire, and then that individual creates new lines of vampires throughout the world. And now, switching gears here from DM focus to a little bit more of player focus. While a lot of the content here that I have talked about is how you can, as a DM, better put vampires into your games, there's still plenty of material here for players looking for ideas in how to flavor your backstories and characters with a little bit of some vampire elements. If you're interested in building a vampire-based character, there's a few options you can take for this route. My personal favorite is going the Dhampir. But you see, Dhampir are a race of something akin to a pseudo-vampire. Maybe your character was the victim of a vampire attack, but something went wrong or maybe right that aided you in not becoming a vampire spawn. Maybe your character was descended from a vampire. Maybe your character was afflicted by powerful magic and it changed their form. And using this as a springboard, you can even have the character's class really lean into this narrative. Are they someone who draws on these malevolent powers with something like Shadow Sorcerer, or possibly even someone who raises arms against it with Cleric or Paladin? Whatever route you want to take, both as a player and as a DM, I hope you enjoyed the video and got some really fun ideas for your games. And if you did, then please subscribe for even more D&D and TTRPG content and ideas. And in the meantime, keep smiling, keep scheming, and I'll see all of you next time.